In the intricate web of America's most feared prison gangs, the name Rene Enriquez stands out as both legend and cautionary tale. Once a high-ranking member of the notorious Mexican Mafia, known as La M, Enriquez rose through the ranks with cunning, ruthlessness, and ambition. His story is one of transformation, from street thug to mafia shot caller, and ultimately to government informant. This documentary chronicles the life of Rene Enriquez, tracing his journey through crime, incarceration, power, and redemption, a rare introspection into the soul of a criminal organization and the man who helped build and later dismantle part of it. Rene Enriquez, once a high-ranking member of the Mexican Mafia, was not born into crime. He was forged in it. His transformation from a middle-class kid in Southern California to a feared leader of one of the most violent prison gangs in the United States reveals the powerful influence of environment, identity, and choices made under pressure. Enriquez was born in 1962 in Artesia, a small city in southeastern Los Angeles County. His upbringing, while not privileged, was not impoverished either. His father was a strict, hard-working Mexican immigrant who valued discipline, education, and personal responsibility. He expected Rene to follow a straight path, one that emphasized honor and hard work. But instead, Enriquez was drawn to a different kind of honor, the kind offered by the streets. As a teenager, Enriquez became involved with Artesia 13, a Sureño street gang operating in the greater Los Angeles area. Like many young Latinos in Southern California during the 1970s and 1980s, he found camaraderie, identity, and a sense of power in the gang lifestyle. It wasn't long before petty crime escalated into serious criminal behavior, car thefts, burglaries, drug abuse, and eventually violence. His nickname, Boxer, was earned through his reputation for street fighting, which also hinted at his aggressive personality and hunger for respect. Enriquez's criminal record grew quickly. By his early 20s, he was serving time in California State Prison. It was behind bars that the next phase of his criminal life began. Prison, rather than a place of rehabilitation, became the crucible for his transformation into a professional gangster. Inside, he met hardened criminals who introduced him to the inner workings of the Mexican Mafia, La M, a prison gang that operated like a military hierarchy, enforcing its rule through fear, violence, and loyalty. Enriquez proved himself early. He followed orders, committed assaults, and learned the politics of the yard. His intelligence and charisma set him apart. Unlike many others, he wasn't just muscle. He was strategic and observant. In time, he was invited to become a full-fledged member of the Mexican Mafia, an elite honor that came with both power and blood on his hands. The making of Rene Enriquez was not a matter of fate, but a series of choices, each more dangerous than the last. He sought identity and found it in gang culture. He craved power and gained it through violence. And when offered a way out, he went deeper. By the time he reached his 30s, Enriquez had become one of La M's most influential members, feared, respected, and responsible for a trail of destruction both inside prison and on the streets of Southern California. His early life was the foundation of that journey, a boy raised under strict expectations who turned to the streets for belonging and became one of the most dangerous men in the California penal system. The Mexican Mafia, or La M, was born in the California prison system in the 1950s to unify Latino inmates against the dominance of other prison gangs. But by the time Enriquez entered the system in the 1980s, La M had evolved into a sprawling criminal enterprise, one that exercised control both inside and outside the prison walls. The Mexican Mafia operated like a paramilitary organization with its own codes, ranks, and a ruthlessly enforced code of silence. It was selective in its recruitment. Membership was for life, and betrayal was punishable by death. For ambitious young inmates like Enriquez, it represented the ultimate achievement of respect, fear, and influence. Through connections, Enriquez became an associate of La M, tasked with carrying out orders and proving his loyalty. His rise was meteoric. Intelligent, charismatic, and absolutely merciless when needed, Enriquez quickly made a name for himself. He committed assaults, extorted fellow inmates, and took part in murders ordered by La M's leadership. By the late 1980s, he had earned his full membership into La M, a rare and deadly honor. He was no longer just a gangster, he was a made member of one of the most dangerous criminal fraternities in the country. Enriquez was eager to prove himself. As an associate of the Mexican Mafia, he was responsible for carrying out orders from senior members, including assaults and stabbings. He was intelligent, disciplined, and ruthless, qualities that distinguished him from the average gang member. Over time, his reputation grew. He displayed not only a willingness to kill, but also the ability to organize, strategize, and lead. His making, the formal induction into La M, came after he committed murders on behalf of the organization. One of the most significant early hits he carried out was the murder of David Gallegos, a fellow gang member who had fallen out of favor. Enriquez's efficient handling of the task earned him trust and solidified his loyalty to La M. As a made member, Boxer quickly rose through the Mafia's internal ranks. He began organizing extortion rackets inside prison, controlling the drug trade, and overseeing the taxation system that La M enforced on Latino street gangs across Southern California. Street gangs were required to pay a percentage of their drug profits to the Mexican Mafia, or they faced severe retaliation. By the 1990s, Enriquez had become a key figure in the Mexican Mafia's operations, both in prison and on the streets. He was deeply involved in decision-making, approving hits, managing communications, and maintaining order among lower-level gang members. His rise was not only based on violence, but on his ability to operate the Mafia like a business, expanding its power, eliminating threats, and increasing its influence. Rene "Boxer" Enriquez's rise in La M was fast and brutal, driven by ambition and a willingness to embrace the Mafia's code. His eventual defection would later shake the foundation of the very organization he helped strengthen. Despite his success and power, Enriquez began to feel the weight of his choices. Years of violence, betrayal, and solitary confinement began to eat away at him. His disillusionment was compounded by the Mafia's internal politics, backstabbing, and the never-ending cycle of death. In 1993, Enriquez committed one of his most high-profile murders, the killing of fellow La M member Black Dan in a prison exercise yard. The execution was ordered over disputes related to leadership and loyalty, but the brutal efficiency with which Enriquez carried it out showcased the depths of his entrenchment in the organization. Yet it was this homicide, and others, that marked the beginning of his unraveling. He realized that he was stuck in a violent machine where death was the only exit. Around this time, he began to keep detailed notes about the organization, its operations, and his role within it. It was a risky move. Any suspicion of disloyalty within La M could result in instant execution. By the late 1990s, Enriquez was ready to walk away from the life he had so fervently built. In 2002, he made the unthinkable decision. He approached federal authorities and offered to become an informant. Rene "Boxer" Enriquez once operated at the highest levels of the Mexican Mafia, commanding respect and fear within California's prison system and among Southern California street gangs. But in a move that shocked both law enforcement and criminal circles, Enriquez made a dramatic and dangerous choice. He turned against the very organization he had helped build. As an informant, Enriquez would become one of the most valuable assets in the history of organized crime investigations in California. His cooperation provided unprecedented insight into the Mexican Mafia's inner workings and led to dozens of arrests, convictions, and operational dismantlings. However, his decision also turned him into a marked man, destined to live in isolation for the rest of his life. Enriquez's rise in the Mexican Mafia was meteoric. By the 1990s, he was deeply involved in Mafia leadership, organizing hits, managing drug distribution networks, and overseeing the enforcement of the gang's taxation system on Latino street gangs. But with that power came paranoia, isolation, and the weight of endless violence. Members of La M often turned on one another, driven by suspicion, ambition, or perceived disloyalty. The loyalty that had once bound Enriquez to the gang began to erode under the constant threat of betrayal and the realization that there was no retirement plan, only death or a life sentence. It was during this period of reflection, especially after the 1993 murder of fellow Mafia member Black Dan Barrela, an assassination Enriquez himself carried out, that Enriquez began contemplating the unthinkable, walking away. In 2002, after serving more than a decade in solitary confinement and having time to reflect on his crimes and his role in the organization, Enriquez reached out to federal law enforcement. What he offered them would change the course of gang investigations in California. The Mexican Mafia operates on strict principles. Chief among them is omerta, the code of silence. Members who cooperate with authorities or inform on fellow gang members are automatically marked for death. No exceptions. When Enriquez agreed to testify and share intelligence, he became one of the most high-profile traitors in the history of La M. What made Enriquez different from most defectors was his rank and the depth of his knowledge. He was not a low-level associate or a reluctant participant. He had been a decision-maker, a strategist, and a killer. He had carried out orders and issued them. His detailed understanding of La M's structure, operations, and leadership was unprecedented. He began cooperating with law enforcement agencies at both the state and federal level, providing names, dates, methods of communication, and first-hand accounts of Mafia business. His information helped prosecutors secure convictions in major racketeering cases and expose the Mafia's control over drug sales, extortion rings, and violent enforcement tactics both inside prisons and on the streets. One of Enriquez's most valuable contributions came through his courtroom testimony. Over the years, he has testified in multiple state and federal trials, often under heavy guard and using high-level security measures due to the threat against his life. In these proceedings, Enriquez described in detail how La M recruited new members, issued murder contracts, enforced rules, and communicated secretly through Kite's small coded notes and gang intermediaries. His ability to recall names, affiliations, and events helped connect various members to criminal acts and validated years of law enforcement intelligence gathering. Perhaps most notably, his testimony has served to educate judges, juries, and the public about how the Mexican Mafia functions as a highly organized syndicate, one that rivals traditional Mafia families in its scope and sophistication. Beyond the courtroom, Enriquez became a valuable resource for law enforcement training. He participated in briefings with the FBI, ATF, Department of Justice, and local police departments. In these sessions, he detailed the psychological, cultural, and operational tactics of the Mexican Mafia, helping officers understand how to identify gang leadership, interpret gang codes, and disrupt ongoing criminal networks. In numerous interviews and lectures, often recorded under protective custody, Enriquez has also spoken about his personal evolution, explaining how and why young people are drawn into gang life. These insights have been used in gang prevention programs and correctional officer training across California. Since becoming an informant, Enriquez's life has been anything but ordinary. Although still incarcerated, he has lived for years under protective custody, largely in solitary confinement. The threat against his life remains constant. Any interaction with the general prison population could result in a death sentence, as La M and its street-level allies maintain a standing order to eliminate Boxer. Despite his value as a witness and informant, parole has remained elusive. California's parole board has recommended Enriquez for release multiple times, citing his extraordinary cooperation and transformation. However, governors, including Jerry Brown and Gavin Newsom, have repeatedly blocked his release, arguing that he poses an ongoing security risk both to himself and to the public, given the deep-rooted hatred the Mexican Mafia holds for him. Enriquez's turn from feared Mafia hitman to government informant has sparked debate. Some view him as a man genuinely seeking redemption, someone who has taken responsibility for his crimes and is now using his experience to prevent others from going down the same path. His cooperation has unquestionably saved lives and disrupted criminal enterprises. Others remain skeptical. Critics argue that Enriquez's decision to inform was based more on self-preservation than remorse. After years in solitary confinement with no way to advance or escape, he may have seen cooperation as the only option to improve his conditions. Some also question whether someone with his violent past can truly change. Yet even his critics must acknowledge the effectiveness of his impact. No other informant has come close to offering the volume, depth, and strategic insight that Enriquez provided. His story has been the subject of documentaries, academic studies, and law enforcement casebooks. Rene Enriquez lives in a paradox. He helped build one of the most violent criminal organizations in California and then became instrumental in tearing parts of it down. He is both a cautionary tale and a valuable teacher. He is a murderer and a protector, a traitor to some, a hero to others. What remains undeniable is the legacy of his cooperation. His decision to inform fundamentally altered how law enforcement investigates and prosecutes prison gangs in California. He provided not just evidence, but understanding, a rare glimpse into the inner mechanics of a group shrouded in secrecy and violence. Enriquez once sought power through fear. Now he seeks redemption through truth. Whether or not he deserves a second chance is a question that continues to divide opinion. But in breaking the Mexican Mafia's silence, he became something no one ever expected, a witness to its darkest secrets. The story of Rene Enriquez is one of extreme contrasts, from assassin to informant, gangster to educator, feared mobster to marked man. His life reveals the inner architecture of the Mexican Mafia, a secretive and brutal organization that has shaped California's gang culture for decades. But more than that, his journey is a human one, filled with ambition, regret, and the pursuit of redemption in a world that rarely offers it. Whether seen as a hero, villain, or something in between, Enriquez's legacy is undeniable. His story asks difficult questions about justice, forgiveness, and the possibility of change. And in that, it mirrors the story of countless men caught in the cycle of violence and incarceration, men who, like Boxer, must confront the ghosts of the lives they once led.